Blue Wire Hustle proudly presents another edition of All Eyes on Cleveland. Tonight's episode, a new look Browns defense with very special guest Andy Hansen, NFL player personnel analyst and COO of the 33rd team. He will tell you about the 33rd team. It is an awesome website and very cool what they're doing over there. Analytics, a GM's perspective of things, and the interview is killer. So a lot to talk about tonight as we do go through the defense, but we will also discuss the NFLPA and everything going on as JC Tretter's role as the NFLPA President is starting to have an effect on the Browns a little bit as we move from phase 2 to phase 3 next week, where the Browns are going to be on the field, and he is still saying that him and his teammates will not show up, even though the Browns have been very cooperative and ready to be virtual all through phase 1 and phase 2, while other teams have agreed upon deals and are showing up 70 and 80 deep in their facilities. It is somewhat discouraging to see this from JC Tretter still. And we'll get into that after the interview. We talk about it a little bit in the interview, but after the interview, certainly. But let's, without further ado, let's get you to the interview with Andy Hansen. It's a terrific interview. He's outstanding. He is from the 33rd team. He is the COO, NFL player personnel analyst, and break everything down. I think you're really going to like this one tonight here on All Eyes on Cleveland. Mikey's on the 1s and 2s. My name is Brad Ward, and this is All Eyes on Cleveland. So let's get to it. Here we go. We are thrilled to welcome to All Eyes on Cleveland tonight a very special guest. His name is Andy Hansen. He is the NFL player personnel analyst and COO of the 33rd team. Welcome to the show, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here, Brad. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Very, very thrilled to have you on the show. Excited to learn a little bit about the 33rd team. Can you tell us what you guys do over there? I know it's a kind of a front office approach, I believe.
Yeah.
And you can kind of maybe tell me a little bit about the website and everything.
Yeah, so I met Mike Tannenbaum when I was graduating with my master's degree from the University of Massachusetts. And we decided to start this program as a two-pronged thing where coaches and front office personnel who are either in between jobs or still currently active and wanting to get better and deeper understanding of analytics and coaching and build their network. We built this hub for them as a landing spot. And from the other side, we built an internship program to help people who are interested in getting their foot in the door and growing their analytics side. So we have a lot of master's students who are diving deep into analytics and learning from the front office execs about what analytics are being used and the best ways to apply them in game, in season, and in the hiring process. So that's what we've been doing. We also we have a website, the33rdteam.com. We have a newsletter that comes out 3 times a week. We send it to every front office in the NFL. We're trying to build football content for football experts. So if you're a real football nerd and you're interested in learning about what GMs are reading, feel free to come to our website and we'll provide that for you. We scout the top 200 guys in every draft. So fire away on any questions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I went on the website, very interesting stuff, awesome content on there, breakdowns, as you said, the analytics view of everything and looking at it kind of from what GMs are reading. I mean, that's an awesome perspective. The whole concept of the 33rd team is very, very interesting. Certainly something that as Browns fans, as we know, with Paul D. Podesta and our analytics team of Andrew Berry and everybody, something that I'm sure Browns fans would be very interested in as far as analytics goes.
Yeah.
All right. Andy Hansen of the 33rd team. The show tonight, we are touching on the Browns' new look defense. And this offseason, Andy, they've really remade everything. I think that, projected starters, which is kind of, a pointless, task at this point, but it appears that maybe only two guys will be returning starters to this team after free agency in the draft. We're talking Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett, it kind of looks like at this point, would be the only two returning starters on the defense. So if you can talk about it, I know you're a player personnel analyst. You talk about a little bit of what they did in free agency to kind of remake this defense, or maybe what they were thinking. They started with John Johnson III. Everybody kind of thought they were going to go defensive end early. The market was expensive, more expensive, I think, than most people thought for defensive ends. And they went to safety, John Johnson III, and actually got him to sign for a little bit less to come to Cleveland. Thoughts on that signing? And then Troy Hill, as they get 2/5 of the best secondary in football last year.
Yeah, if I'm a Browns fan, I was jumping in joy at the John Johnson signing. Safety was a glaring need on the roster, and you guys went out and got the best one that you could in free agency. He's one of those safeties who can really do everything. I'd be, incredibly excited to watch this guy play in a Browns uniform next year.
Yeah.
After that, I don't think I'd be too worried about the attrition rate of how many people you lost. Like, at the end of the day, you kept Myles Garrett, and he's, going to be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year for the next 5 years. And Denzel Ward is obviously a slam dunk if he can stay on the field also.
Thoughts on the Jadeveon Clowney signing?
So Jadeveon Clowney was an interesting thing from my perspective. And one thing we talk a lot about is making trades with yourself in an NFL front office. And that's what happened when you decided to sign Jadeveon Clowney to cut Sheldon Richardson. And I think that Clowney is a guy that you've had your eyes on for obviously the last several years. You've had him in. You thought you were going to sign him last year. And maybe the best thing for you happened with him going and flunking out at the Titans, because now you're able to get him at a very affordable rate compared to what he was looking for last year. And I think it's an interesting setup on the defensive line, because everybody thinks Jadeveon Clowney, and they think back to that hit he had in Michigan where he almost killed that poor running back. Yeah, if you haven't seen it and you just want to enjoy the hardest football hit you're going to see today, go and Google Jadeveon Clowney versus Michigan. But this guy has never had a 10-sack season. He isn't the premier pass rusher we thought we were getting. He's not Myles Garrett. He is a different player, but he is a very solid edge player. He can really set the edge, which is going to be important in Cleveland, because you play teams like the Ravens, where they're trying to spread you out and then cut up field. And I think that he is a big athletic guy who can keep a guy like Lamar Jackson in the pocket. I don't think you guys have to worry about the Steelers this year. I think that's a guaranteed 2 wins right there. And then the Bengals are basically in the same situation where they decided to draft Jamar Chase instead of Sewell. So, you're probably going to have 5 sacks a game against them. Malik Jackson's a guy I like a lot, because he will be able to play that Sheldon Richardson role that you guys thought you were getting with him.
Yes.
And just keep the interior of the offensive line good. And then you're going to rotate your second defensive tackle, whether that's Billings or Elliott or Togiai. You're just going to put in nobody wins and loses based off of their second defensive tackle. So I wouldn't put too much worry into that if I was a Browns fan.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like Billings would be the guy probably to start there. They didn't really have a guy that could play that role. It's more of just, multiple 3-tech guys there in the past. And Billings kind of brings a different dimension to that defensive line a little bit. And I think he'll probably start next to Malik Jackson. What are your thoughts on Jordan Elliott? Do you like him as a player going into his second year? Some people thought maybe his first year was a little underwhelming, as he did get, probably like a 20-snap role a game.
I liked him as a prospect. I just don't think he's going to flash. I don't think he's going to be an all-pro. I think he'll be a very solid player going forward. But at the end of the day, everybody wants
Just a
their
piece.
defensive tackle to be Chris Jones. Everybody wants their defensive tackle to be Warren Sapp. And, everybody looks at Aaron Donald. And that's just, there's a reason that we know their names. And there's a reason that you can't name 10 defensive tackles in the NFL right now. So Elliott will be fine. And I also think a lot of people look at defensive rookies of the year and look at the defensive talent you guys have gotten over the last couple of drafts. You do expect your rookies to really show out their first year. And the reality is most rookies need at least a year to develop, especially a guy who's playing defensive tackle against the strongest people in the NFL. Don't get too worried about Elliott. He'll be fine.
Okay, very good news there. They did address defensive tackle in the 4th round in this draft as they went Tommy Togiai. We'll talk about some of the other prospects they brought in here a little bit later, but talk about the Browns draft, what you liked, what you didn't. Obviously, at the top of the draft, you could get Greg Newsome and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, as they were probably looking at Owusu-Koramoah at their first-round pick, and were able to get both of them is kind of a coup, right? What did you think about the draft overall, and do you think that I'll save that question. But thoughts on the draft overall for the Browns?
Yeah, so Newsome is a guy we liked. We had him as our 4th corner. His big problem was staying on the field and staying healthy, which I know Browns fans aren't going to want to hear another defensive back with injury issues, but that's the reality. Yes. He's got great twitch. He's got great feet. He's got great placement. He can play the ball well in the air. He's a very fast and agile player. If he can stay healthy, you guys are going to love him. Owusu-Koramoah is a guy who, you don't draft a guy in the first round not knowing what position he's going to play on the field. And you've seen a lot of draft busts because they draft a guy who's a linebacker and expect him to play edge. They draft an edge and expect him to play linebacker. Okudah played a 3-deep defense at Ohio State, and they drafted him and expected him to be a man cover corner. You draft a guy in the first round that you know what he did last year and you know he can do it this year. And then after that is where you can take these tweener guys. And Owusu-Koramoah is a tweener guy. If you look at how he looked at Notre Dame, guy looked like he weighed 205 pounds. His playing weight might have been under 215. And how many under 215-pound middle linebackers have you seen be successful in the NFL? And so that's where I was looking at him as a player of, okay, is this going to be a guy like Jeremy Chin, a big, fast, physical safety instead of an actual dedicated middle linebacker? So that's how I'm looking at him, is he could play, a multitude of different roles, versatility wise. He can cover the tight end. He can, he also isn't afraid of contact. He will go and hit. He will go and chase guys down. He does have the speed to go sideline to sideline. He is a very good linebacker, true linebacker. It's just a question of, is he going to be able to get up to 230 pounds in the NFL? He was playing at Notre Dame, and it's not like Notre Dame has a bad strength and conditioning program. They probably have one of the best in the country. They probably have a better strength and conditioning program than some of the NFL teams. So, what is it that kept his weight so low, and what is it that he decided that his weight could be that in the college level? After that, I like James Hudson a lot.
Yeah.
And then Richard LeCount is actually a safety that I broke down with Mark Sanchez. If you go to the 33rd Team's YouTube channel, you can see us do a profile on him. And Mark actually said that this guy reminded him of Polamalu with his ability to assess where the ball's going, and then he's shot out a cannon going straight at it. If you go look at Richard LeCount highlights versus Alabama. This guy was tracking down and tackling Jalen Waddle in the open field. This guy, he's a very good player. I'd be excited to see what he does in year one, and getting him in the 5th round is something that the Browns should be patting themselves on the back for.
Absolutely. So a couple of questions for you about these guys. Greg Newsome will be going head-to-head in camp with Greedy Williams, coming off a year that he didn't play one snap because of nerve damage. Do you expect Newsome to win that job opposite Ward on the outside?
Uh, if I'm running an NFL team, I don't want my rookie corner to beat out my other top draft pick corner who's coming off an injury.
Okay.
I want the guy with more experience to get out there and play, and I like Greedy a lot as a player. I like Greedy a lot as a player.
Okay.
So I think Newsome has the ability. I think it's how are we going to use this guy to get him used to the NFL game, because I don't want a guy who played a limited amount of snaps at Northwestern to all of a sudden be going and covering another team's wide receiver too. Let him slow roll himself onto the field like Greedy, who's been in this program for now going into his third year play. But yeah, he has the talent to. So I wouldn't put it past him to be able to talent-wise. I just, from a team building standpoint, wouldn't be excited if he did.
From that team building standpoint, how much do you factor in that, like, Greedy was drafted by a prior regime where Newsome was taken by this regime?
There's some credibility to the reality that players will get drafted into one scheme and then the scheme will turn over and that player's ability will be gone. But a guy who's drafted as high as Greedy, he is versatile across several schemes.
Okay.
And the kid's a very talented player. I think that you'd be more worried with the mid-level free agents that were brought in and the late round draft picks that were, maybe based off of different analytics, but also DePodesta was there.
Yeah.
So it's not like they went completely different.
Absolutely. So back to JOK real quick, or whatever they're going to call him, Woo or Joker. He's got a bunch of nicknames here in Cleveland already. So nobody wants to say Owosu Koromoa 1,000 times a day. But yeah, so as far as his role, he came out and said that he wants to play linebacker. They had the rookie camp, and it looked like he was lining up at linebacker. I get the feeling they kind of want to play him like at the will linebacker position a little bit, and because they brought in Anthony Walker to play middle linebacker. They have a guy, Jacob Phillips from LSU, who's really speedy, that came on at the end of last year. I think they're really high on him. I don't think they expect to have a lot of linebackers on the field, as Joe Woods has talked about last season, wanting to deploy this 3-safety dime look the majority of the time. And he was kind of unable to do it. I think he said he did it like 17 snaps last season after Delpit blew out his knee or got injured in training camp, right? So that kind of took away his ability to do that, because then they were forced into giving a lot of playing time to guys that they didn't expect to at the safety position. So they bring in Ronnie Harrison midway through the year, and he grades out really well. They like him a lot. Delpit coming back from injury, and then, of course, John Johnson III, who's an absolute stud. So they have 3 really good safeties. I mean, do you see Owosu Koromoa, could he play that linebacker role, or do you see him more playing like that rover or whatever role, that big nickel role of that third safety more?
I mean, I think it's wherever he is effective. Yeah. And I wouldn't bet my mortgage that he'll be an effective middle linebacker. That will linebacker spot probably is where he would want to be, so that he can track down plays from the back end. And to get to your point that they want to run 3 safety, I also wouldn't bet my mortgage that a kid who's coming off of a blown Achilles is going to be able to start his second year in the NFL. Delpit is a very talented player. Delpit is not a guy who tackles well. In fact, Delpit has got probably a guy who is going to drive you absolutely insane with how many tackles he misses. But he is a very talented cover safety, and a very sticky guy. You're going to be super excited at the blow-up plays that he makes when it does come to making plays on the ball. LeCount is another guy that I think that they're going to be excited to see what he can do at safety. But I think that JOK kind of gives them the versatility that if one of these guys, if Delpit doesn't come back quickly, if LeCount is struggling, I think he ran a 4.8, but he was much faster on tape. So I think that he really helped the Browns out because they were able to afford him with a 5th round pick. Whereas if he ran a 4.5, this guy's probably going in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yes.
With the same tape, which kind of drives me nuts as an evaluator. But JOK, I would just be afraid to have 3 safeties and then Owusu-Koramoah at linebacker and not think that you're about to get the ball run down your throat.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is certainly a thought there. I guess that'll have to play itself out sort of, by trial and error to see how they do that. Of the 3 safeties, I wanted to ask you this. So if you were evaluating Ronnie Harrison and then also who they're high on, I don't know what your thoughts on Harrison are, but Ronnie Harrison, Delpit, say he gets healthy, and then you can throw LeCount in there, and then John Johnson III. Ideally, which safety spot would be best for those 4 guys, do you think? Are they interchangeable somewhat?
Yeah, I think Ronnie Harrison and John Johnson are pretty versatile. I would put Delpit as more of a free. I would put LeCount closer to the line as a box. Okay. And then if you're throwing Owusu-Koramoah in there, then he's a box.
Perfect. That's good stuff there. And you're listening to All Eyes on Cleveland. Special guest Andy Hansen, NFL player personnel analyst and COO for the 33rd team. Go check that out at the33rdteam.com, as well as you guys have a YouTube channel, right?
Yep. We got a YouTube. We got a Twitter. Follow us at the 33rd Team FB. We have a lot of great special guests. We have a lot of former professionals who are always interacting with our content. Currently, we have 10 guys who used to be NFL head coaches. We have 8 guys who used to be NFL GMs, 2 guys who were former NFL presidents. All of our content is created with professionals, by professionals, for professionals in the NFL. You're not going to get any hot takes or clickbait stuff from us. So if that's what you're looking for, we're definitely not the BuzzFeed of football. We're more the Wall Street Journal of football.
Love that. Perfect. Very cool. All right. So what has to happen for this defense? This defense is taking a new shape. As I mentioned, all these guys either coming back from injuries. You got Billings. You've got all these new free agents, coming into play. And as I mentioned, Ward and Garrett are really your mainstays from last year that were on the field. What does this team have to do to come together to be an elite defense? Is it more about the pass rush for you? Do you think they have the ability to be an elite cover team? What are your thoughts on the personnel that they've put together here?
I think that this is a team that if you're hoping they're getting an identity, you're hoping they're getting an identity like the Legion of Boom. Where they have a couple guys who rotate who can really get after the quarterback. You have Myles Garrett, who I think is a top 5 defensive player in the NFL, who, it's possibility that not only that he could have a double-digit sack season, but he might be able to get a 20-sack season. Now you have Clowney on the other edge, so you're not going to have a quarterback running to his side to get away from Garrett. You're not going to be able to give 100% of the blocking scheme to Garrett. It gives you a lot of versatility, rush from the edge from both sides, but they're going to be like a 3-deep cover similar to the Legion of Boom with a lot of firing blitzes, with a lot of different looks and a lot of easy interceptions and a lot of teeing off on wide receivers who are not expecting a zone player to be in their grill the second they catch the football. So be ready for, maybe some targeting calls, but an exciting defense to watch with very talented players in the back end.
Yeah, we love to hear that. So let's talk about potential weaknesses real quick, okay? So for me last year, it was absolutely brutal. Kevin Johnson was their nickel corner, right? And because of injuries and COVID and a number of things, he was forced to play outside where he's not very good. He wasn't very good inside either, to be honest. But then when he got hurt or got taken out, they filled in that nickel or slot corner with a guy named Tavier Thomas, who before last year didn't play any downs on defense, was just a special teams guy at cornerback, and MJ Stewart, who is a short and kind of slow. He made some big plays in the Steelers games down the stretch, including the playoff game, but not guys that I would like to go back to if that situation were to present itself this year. They upgraded at that position, which I thought was key, getting Troy Hill, probably the best nickel available. And then, they have him, and he's interchangeable that if depth issues occurred, he could go outside because he's played, the younger part of his career as an outside corner and did okay. So he could go out there. I wonder if somebody gets hurt or dinged and he has to go outside, who they're going to replace him with inside as a nickel slot corner. They really don't have anybody on the roster. It's MJ Stewart. It's guys like that. Do you think that they have... there's guys still in the market like Brian Poole, Nickel Roby-Coleman, Darquez Dennard. Do you like any of those guys to potentially get signed to the Browns, or do you think they're done in free agency probably?
I'd say they're probably done. Okay. If you said I had to take this defensive backfield and win games, I'd be pretty excited. Obviously you want to build depth for your team going into training camp and the season. And that kind of happens with snake-bitten teams that lost a lot of guys last year, that you want to have that depth ready. But I think the reality is, like, you're much deeper in the defensive backfield and the defensive front. But if you took an injury to any of your linebackers, then you're playing with guys who, might have been working at 7-Eleven the day before. Your linebackers are really where you want to be able to get that last depth guy. Like, can we afford Quan Alexander? Do we take a shot on Reuben Foster? Like, can we get one of those linebackers who we can really trust to stuff the run? Because the versatility and the three safety look is something that's sexy and, might cause a lot of interceptions, but the Chargers did it 2 years ago or 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And they were, making a ton of defensive plays. They were flying all over the field. They beat Lamar Jackson in a playoff game. And then they go to New England, and New England runs for 6 touchdowns.
Yep.
It's definitely not something you want to be your staple. You want to be able to go back to jumbo. You want to be able to go back to stop the run. So I think a guy like Reuben Foster would really be able to come in and make a difference on this team and give you some more flexibility, where I think your stable of defensive backs right now is pretty sexy and something I'd be excited to play with. Getting another guy will make you feel better insurance-wise. But, halfway through the season, you might be like, why the hell did we spend money on Brian Poole? We can't stop the run.
It's a great point. They have guys like, you're right. They have to show versatility. I think they'll keep guys like Taki, who's been good against the run for that kind of situation. But, of course, what are your thoughts on Anthony Walker as a player, their free agency ad at linebacker, as a middle linebacker? Do you like him or no?
Yeah, he's a fine player. I wouldn't get super stoked and run out and get his jersey. But he's coming from a team that also needs linebackers, so it kind of says something to me when you don't get retained by a team that's already thin at your own position.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Although they did, Darius Leonard and those guys did throw a fit when he did sign with the Browns. I've never seen a more passionate goodbye video in my life, I don't think, than Leonard sent for him. But so a guy that loves to get in the room and study the tape, and that's a good thing. All right, let's look at the defensive tackle room real quick, because I think they want to add a fourth guy. They draft Tommy Togiai. You can give me your thoughts on him. But then, Marvin Wilson, priority free agent, they go out and sign right away, offer him some money to come into camp, as well as Malik McDowell, a name from the past, hasn't played a NFL snap, drafted in the second round, probably a first-round type physical trait prospect. Obviously dominated at Michigan State. He's an absolute beast. I talked to a couple people that were at rookie camp and just could not get over how big this guy is. He's like 6'6", 6'7", just a monster on the field. And then they bring in Damian Square, a veteran who has played a lot of downs out in the Chargers, which is they've been running a very similar scheme as the Browns will probably continue to run some of that cover three press bail Seattle type defense, right? As we look at that, those guys coming in to fill maybe that fourth defensive tackle role, do you think Togiai easily fills that role? Or do any of these guys worth a lotto ticket look at, or think either any of them could make the team? McDowell, Wilson, Square, thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, Togiai would be my favorite of that group.
Okay.
Marvin Wilson is a guy who has perked up a lot of ears in Cleveland, because if you were looking at 2021 prospects this time last year, Marvin Wilson was on a lot of draft boards going in the first round. But I don't know if Marvin decided to, take the year off because he assumed he was getting drafted in the first round, but he didn't look great at Florida State last year. He wasn't in the greatest shape. He came to the Senior Bowl, and I saw him down there, and he didn't look like he was ready to compete down there. I don't know if he just needs like a shot in the arm and a wake-up call like he did to go undrafted. But at the end of the day, he went undrafted for a reason. All 32 teams all said no to Marvin repeatedly. So he's a kid that might take an entire year just to get back into football shape. McDowell is an interesting guy. Another one where it's like, hey, where's your head at? Is professional football what you want to do? Or, you obviously didn't get your shot at Seattle because of different reasons. But now you're here in Cleveland. Do you want to play football? Do you want to play football at a high level? But a lot of those guys for me are scratch tickets. You don't know which guy you're getting in the building. You don't know which guy you're getting in the weight room, and you don't know which guy you're getting in the meeting room. So it's difficult to, I don't want to get anybody listening excited. Togiai is a great player, and those other guys, if you want to get excited and think about what could be, one of them might end up being a knockout, but the reality is they washed out first. So it's going to be a comeback story if any of those guys really shine for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it feels like, is just they brought in some lotto tickets to maybe see if they could bolster that room a little bit. I know McDowell. I had a guy on that worked with McDowell last year at the, oh man, it's gonna escape me now, but it was a college showcase, the CSG or the CGS.
Yeah, the CGI Gridiron Showcase.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So Mike Riddleman was on my show, and he had worked with McDowell there, and he said that he was humble and seemed like he was trying to change his life around. And this is the first guy that Andrew Berry has signed who is kind of character questionable. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that he went out and he made a statement that was pretty supportive of McDowell. You wonder if he could pull it all together, if he would be a nice gain, because certainly he's a talented dude.
Yeah, I imagine if he doesn't pull it together, he's going to be cut immediately. Yes. So he might be one of those guys that you wake up on Wednesday morning on a random off day and you get a push notification that he's been cut, and that'll be his last opportunity in the NFL if that happens for him.
You're listening to All Eyes on Cleveland. Andy Hansen from the 33rd team, NFL player personnel analyst and COO. Real quickly, let's hit on the NFLPA and JC Tretter, if you don't mind, just for a moment here. Do you have time for that, Andy?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to take a quick look at this here. So this is the article. The whole NFLPA message to stay away. I did a whole video on it and how, for me, it was contradictory to the players after Jawan James situation. These guys, should be with professionals. They should protect their money. They're insured when they're in the building. Why would the NFLPA tell them to stay away from the building when that's probably not what's in their best interest? If they make that individual decision, that's between them and their agent and their family, but that's up to them. That shouldn't be an NFLPA message to that. And how is that hurting ownership? However, coaches and teams have kind of come to like, hey, we want these guys here. Let's meet them halfway. And about 14 or 15 teams have come to agreements where like, hey, we're going to morph our offseason program to walk through in this, no 11 on 11s until this amount, if you guys are here, right? And guys are showing up. You know, some teams have 70 guys in the building right now, right? So it's worked out for some teams. If we go to this article, and this is from Cleveland.com here, Tretter wrote that less than half the NFL players attended the 4-week phase one. Players on more than half the teams in the league have negotiated new rules for the remaining voluntary workout periods. The Browns are one of these teams, right? And he goes on to talk about that, or they talk about it in the article, where the teams are permitted on-field instruction in the 1 week phase two this week, but the Browns opted to remain virtual, so they're meeting them kind of halfway for the veterans, and will take to the field next week in phase three, which consists of 10 practices over 3 weeks, followed by the mandatory minicamp. Now, Tretter goes on, you know, and that's their negotiation with the Browns, to say that he and his teammates will hold firm and skip the voluntary practices because the leadership council believes most guys feels good about where they're training and what they're doing. So why negotiate this if you're just going to stand firm and not go anyways?
I don't know what the hell the NFLPA is trying to do. After Juwan James tearing his ACL, doing the right thing, you know, working out, staying in shape so that he can come back and compete. It's just a very cautionary tale of, is it worth millions of dollars to you to work out at a different facility? And I know a lot of the people who are listening right now have spent the last year and a half inside their house with their significant other, with their families, with their pets. And if they were offered the opportunity to go get breakfast, work out, go to your team room, meet with the other people on your team, get lunch with your buddies, talk to your coach, and then come back in the afternoon, they would probably run through a wall to be able to have that opportunity. And I think it's just a difference of, you know, lifestyles and expectations. And, you know, you have guys who are making $10 million on your team. And like the reality is, you know, if you're a rookie and you're trying to get playing time, you want every second you can get with your coach. You want to have that, you know, ability. Whereas if you tear your Achilles training in a different state, your team doesn't know if you were training or if you were doing something stupid or if you were, you know, water skiing.
Playing basketball or something, yeah.
Yeah, like it's just a reality of, is it worth your NFL playing future to do it outside the facility? And there's some players, you know, who have come out and said, yeah, absolutely. But a lot of those guys are already financially stable, or already most of the way through their second contract, you know, who trust their bodies. But there's not a single guy who's ever torn his ACL or blown his Achilles during practice who hasn't thought he was going to be fine that day. Those are freak injuries that happen all the time, you know. And if I was an NFL player, I would just be saying, hey guys, just go into the facility. Don't be dumb. Like,
exactly.
But I think the NFLPA is trying to push to be able to get guaranteed money into contracts. And this is a big spot where they found there's a lot of money that's lost to players who don't do off-season training programs, who don't do off-season, you know, strength programs with their team, who lose money to not having it available to them in their home state. But I think if I'm a personal player, an individual who, I don't care what the union's doing, I want to make sure my playing career and my future with my team is as stable as it can be.
Yeah, no question. I mean, like I've said this before on this show, is we talk about like we're pro player on the show. I'm an advocate of the players. Like I want them to get their money. It's a different sport. It's not like the NBA. It's not like the MLB. There isn't all the guaranteed money. But like this NFLPA message doesn't seem to be in the best interest of the players. All the players. It may be in the best interest of maybe like the JC Tretters of the world who have a secure job, But they've been also accused, and you can tell me if you think there's any truth to this, and a lot of people are kind of like, no, that's not the way it is. But a lot of these guys that are veterans that are at the head of the NFLPA, like you said, have secure jobs, have been telling people to stay away to potentially preserve their jobs, or they've been accused of that to help preserve their jobs, to keep younger players away from potentially going in there, working with the coaches and taking their job. Do you think there's some validity to that?
I wouldn't trust any of the messaging coming from either side on this topic at this point.
Okay.
Because you just don't know. The NFLPA is not being honest on why they don't want people in the building. And the team is just like, hey, guys, what team building activity is ever not good for the team?
Right.
This is
no question.
It's only frustrating for the coaches, and it's only costing these guys opportunities to, build those relationships with their coaches, get a better understanding, have that conversation that's next to the water cooler instead of in the building, and in the team room. And at the end of the day, like if I'm a rookie and my contract has paid me $2 million so far, and I have the $100 million quarterback who wants to be able to, drink margaritas and then go throw with Gronk on a beach somewhere, like, I'm really happy that you won the lottery at life, buddy, but I still need to make money, No
question. No question. It's as you said, it affects the coaches and the players, but the pushback is it's supposed to be towards the owners. But this doesn't affect the owners at all. Like, guys not showing up to voluntary workouts doesn't affect the owners in any way. If anything, it probably saves them money on food and everything else. I mean, how is that a pushback to what the owners? I don't see how that affects them. It seems like the wrong battle to fight for me as far as the NFLPA. If you're picking your battles to fight and push back, this just seems like the wrong one, Andy.
I think the long-term goal of the NFLPA is to set up non-team specific satellite workout facilities in every state and most major cities, which would cost the owners a ton. To be able to have one, you have to worry about, all right, well, now we're going to have Broncos players training with Dolphins players, training with Browns players. Are they going to be BSing and telling each other the playbooks? Are they going to be trying to recruit each other to go to their teams? Is it going to turn into the NBA kind of thing? And then two, you have to staff them. You have to pay the bills to have the lights on, and it's something that they have the money for, so do they take that out of the next, like, they just started this 10-year cycle for the new NBA NFLPA agreement. So NFL, NBA, NFL, NL, you know what I'm saying. This new agreement for the next 10 years, they're not going to be able to negotiate it until 2030. So, maybe this is their first steps of like trying to set up an actual satellite program where you can work out in the off season. And if you blow your ACL, you don't lose all your money for NFI reasons, but the ownership doesn't want to set that up. And the players 100% would want to set that up. So I think that this is the first step from the NFLPA to really maybe get the ball rolling in that direction. But at the end of the day, it's going to cost Juwan James and, countless other guys who get injuries that are now NFI related that are going to lose guaranteed money in their contracts because of it.
That's an incredibly interesting point that I have not heard yet, Andy. So thank you. That is very, very interesting to think about, and it certainly makes a hell of a lot of sense. You've been an outstanding guest. It'll be really interesting to see who does show up for this phase 3 that they've worked out. Who stands by Tretter, who doesn't. Like, will Baker show up? You know what I mean? I've reached out to a couple players that have been on the show. I haven't really got a response yet. Like, are you going to phase 3? You know what I mean? That they're going to be on the grass, and I haven't received any responses yet. But it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see who shows up because the rookies are there, right? The rookies are all there, and the rookie minicamp was like 15 dudes, I mean, it was like one-on-ones with the coaches out there. I mean, they couldn't do 11 on 11, nothing, 7-on-7. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. As you know, the Browns have agreed to keep everything virtual. You know, they were very good with that last year. They were able to install virtually and everything. So I get where they're going with this. It's just, to me, it's hurting the Browns, I think, that the president is on their roster. And to what point? Because other teams got 70 guys in the building right now. So
well, and if you look
it'll be
historically, the president of the NFLPA is very quickly off of a roster and very quickly out of the league. You know, once they decide to take that leadership position.
wow.
It's the way it works. Nobody wants that headache.
It's been a headache. It's starting to be even more of one. Andy, you've been spectacular. What a guest. Please go to the 33rd Team, at the 33rd Team on Twitter. Go to 33rdteam.com. Very, very interesting angle and approach to things. Andy, anything else you want to plug before we get you out of here?
Yeah, feel free to follow us at the 33rdteam.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. We're sending out newsletters 3 times a week during this dead period for the next 2 months. So you might not be able to get your football fix from, other news outlets, but we will be sending out newsletters with deep analytics and interviews with our professionals. So if you have that fix for football, come to 33rdteam.com and sign up for our newsletter.
Andy, you're the best, man. Thank you for coming on the show.
Of course. Have a good one.
Yes, sir. And we are back. Andy Hansen of the 33rd Team absolutely killed it in that interview. And some of the most interesting stuff that we got into was regarding the NFLPA. And I have a couple articles coming out on this stuff because he really brought to light something that I haven't heard anybody else say is, NFL sanctioned satellite facilities in different cities around the country in the offseason to protect the players from exactly what happened to Jawan James. Now Deshaun Hamilton, a second Bronco, also a Bronco, has fallen to the same fate where he had a trade was arranged for him, working out away from the facility, got injured. That trade is not going to go through. He's not going to pass the physical, and he's going to be out. He's going to get cut. Non-football injury, NFI. And designated with that NFI, these guys are losing money. And the NFLPA is still saying stay away. They've won. So just to make a point on JC Tretter and why this is becoming a headache and why I am concerned about the Browns and Tretter situation. Phase 2 opened on Monday of this week. If I just go down the news stuff, Broncos, 75 players in attendance. Giants opened phase 2 of offseason program with great attendance. Chicago Bears see strong attendance at voluntary workouts phase 2. Bills show their team first facing NFL's phase 2. Chiefs players report to phase 2. So, as you go down, all of these teams that have worked out some sort of an arrangement with their coach. Arizona Cardinals was another one. Cliff Kingsbury agreed to no 11-on-11s and to take it easy in the practices and whatnot, in the OTA practices. And the players showed up. 70-plus players showed up. Same thing with Miami. The Dolphins. Flores is being lauded in the NFLPA so they've won. They won what they wanted to win. And it's interesting that first time I've heard that from Andy, their long-term goal could be these satellite NFL-sanctioned sites, which is really interesting. But what comes down to the Browns is that the Browns have been beyond cooperative. Phase 1, okay, virtual. We'll do all virtual. Phase 2 is practice allowed at the facility at a teaching pace is the quote unquote, so they can get out on the field at a teaching pace, walkthroughs, going through stuff, installing offense, going over defense. How much does this defense need to get on the field together? So many pieces, parts coming together for the Browns to get better. They need to be on the field together. They agree to phase 2, even though they could be on the field all virtual. Veterans, it's okay. We're still going to do it virtually, right? And despite all of that, despite meeting them halfway, Tretter to Albert Breer yesterday, I don't plan on showing up, and my teammates don't plan on showing up, despite anything that that they've agreed on. Doesn't plan on showing up for phase 3 at all. It consists of 10 practices over the next 3 weeks. And he and team, according to him and his teammates will not be there because they are quote unquote, most guys feel good about where they're training at and what they're doing. So at what point this becomes even more of a headache for the Browns now that the president is on the roster, the team has met them more than halfway with virtual phase 1 and phase 2. Now they're saying we're going to do practices. Phase 3. We're going to do the 10 OTA practices. And Tretter's still saying, despite other teams showing up 70 plus around the league, we're going to stay away. Me and my teammates, we're going to stay away. The veterans are going to stay away. Let's see. I don't know who's going to show up for phase 3, but it's become problematic for me. JC Tretter being the NFLPA president on this roster has now become a problem because this defense can't get on the field and start to get used to each other, the coaches, the scheme, the offense who needs, Stefanski talked about evolving the offense. This is time other teams are having to walk through and learn and steps of the process that they are going to be ahead on of the Browns. Now, we saw last year that Stefanski is very much capable of doing things virtually and keeping pace with these guys. But it's the point of the fact that they could be all there. There could be 70 plus guys in Maria, and they could be going through walkthroughs. And I would feel much better if they were doing that, just like all those other 15 teams that negotiated whatever they had to do to get in the facility. But they're not going to do it because the president of the NFLPA is on their team, and he's saying, we're not coming. And that's a problem. It's more than just a headache. It's a problem. It's now problematic in my eyes. So this has been All Eyes on Cleveland, a look at the brand new Browns defense with Andy Hansen of the 33rd team. He absolutely killed it. Go check out the 33rd team at the 33rd team FB on Twitter. My name is Brad Ward. This has been another edition of All Eyes on Cleveland. We'll be back tomorrow night for the Ravens off-season deep dive and outlook with Kyle Andrews, Ravens insider, and we'll knock that out for you tomorrow as we begin our Around the AFC North portion of the offseason. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Mikey on the ones and twos was fabulous, and once again, Andy Hansen, big thanks. He killed it as usual. Knocked it out of the park with his interview. Troy Hill, I'm going to chime in here.
Sir, All Eyes on Cleveland. We here, yeah.
Troy Hill throwing up the All Eyes on Cleveland. Good to see him on Instagram working out and everything, wearing the Cleveland gear. We are big advocates of Troy Hill on the show and always will be. So with that, for Mikey on the ones and twos, this has been another edition of All Eyes on Cleveland presented by Blue Wire Hustle. My name is Brad Ward. We are out.